All right, so I have 5 articles for you today. Some good news, some not so great news. So let us start with trans woman challenges cops when she's told to cover up at a nude beach. Now just think about this. She's at a nude beach. Why is she being asked to cover up? That is the point of a nude beach. You are in the nude. I'm not sure what. I mean, I could understand if someone was being unruly told to leave, but that's not what this headline says. Just says cover up. All right. Public nudity has been legal in the Emerald City since 1990. Last weekend, nude sunbathers in Seattle, where public nudity has been officially legal since 1990, looked up from the lawn at Denny Blaine, a queer beach on the shore of Lake Washington, to find cops staring them down. The cops ordered them to put their clothes on. One Seattle sunbather, a trans woman, didn't let the order go unchallenged, according to the stranger. John, a witness who sat on a park wall with his bike, said the woman shouted that people did not have to comply. Several other beachgoers said she was threatened with arrest. Because that's what the police do really well. When somebody stands up to them, they threaten them with arrest. Police told the woman not to come back to the park for a week, witnesses say. Which I'm sure she's totally complying with. The queer lakeside hangout in the Denny Blaine neighborhood, a sought-after location in east central Seattle, has a complicated history with neighbors and the police. Last Sunday's events are the most recent in a wave of actions against the beach. In late 2023, beachgoers learned of a plan to construct a playground at Denny Blaine after millionaire homeowner Stuart Sloan, who lives directly across the street from the park, anonymously donated $1 million for construction. That plan failed after public uproar. Now think about this. They're going after a nude beach, which is legal. And I'm pretty sure that's not the only nude beach in Seattle. And I'm going to bet you anything that those other beaches where there's straight people, not a problem. Not a problem at all. Last month, Denny Blaine Park for All, a group of neighbors that include Sloan, sued Seattle for allegedly allowing the beach to become a regional venue for public masturbation and public sex. Regular beachgoers have denied the characterization. Right, because those aren't associated with stereotypes of homosexuals at all. While masturbation does happen at the park, it's rare, beach advocates say, and the consensus is that the community knows how to deal with it without intercession by the police. Exactly. Not every jerk needs to have the police called on them. There are other ways to deal with unruly people. The neighborhood group's lawsuit also goes after legal nudity, making an argument that Seattle's Parks Department is violating its code of conduct by depriving neighbors of enjoyment of the park. If you don't want to see nude people, then don't go to a nude beach. I mean, it was designated a nude beach, and since they said it officially became legal in 1990, I assume that means people were going nude anyway. Beachgoers say police arrived at Denny Blaine around 2:40 p.m. on Sunday. About 20 sunbathers on the beach were asked to cover up. Carlos, who has to use only his first name to protect his privacy, said he was lying naked on the grassy upper level of the park when an SPD officer approached him and said he couldn't go nude. He's been coming to the beach for 7 years and told officers that wasn't true. Nudity has been legal in Seattle since the 1990 case Seattle versus Johnson found a local law against lewd conduct violated the right to free expression. While Washington State has a law against indecent exposure, SPD guidance from 2008 says that officers shouldn't take action unless there's lewd or offensive behavior, which lying on a grassy spot of a park is not either of those. Carlos said he was only sunbathing, as was the transgender woman who was harassed. Officers told one regular beachgoer that the anti-nude crackdown was ordered by higher-ups. Okay, that's great. That still doesn't change the fact it's a fucking nude beach. So, yeah. Several beachgoers said a blonde man parked in a gray Chevy Tahoe spoke to one of the officers when she arrived. They suspect he made the call. He told one longtime beachgoer he was hired as private security by interests in the neighborhood. I'm sure those are bigoted interests because, again, I doubt that anybody has a problem with any other nude beaches in Seattle. Now, do I know how many more are there? No, but considering this was specified as a queer nude beach, I'm assuming that there are other nude beaches around. So, yeah. Yeah, this article doesn't go into it, but I would be shocked if there's anybody going after any of those other nude beaches. I mean, maybe there are. Maybe there truly is an anti-nudity crusade, so maybe there are problems at other nude beaches, but until we get more information, we can only assume bigotry. So, that is the end of that first article. So now let's get to some good news. Lesbian moms in Italy just won an important right in a historic court victory. I am happy no one will now be able to challenge the fact our son is our son, one mother said. In a major victory for lesbian couples, Italy's top court ruled this week that the same-sex partners of women who conceive via in vitro fertilization, or IVF, have the right to be legally recognized as their children's parents. Too bad it doesn't include gay couples, but as Reuters reports, in a ruling announced on Thursday, May 22nd, Italy's constitutional court found that it's unconstitutional to deny legal recognition to the non-biological mother of children conceived abroad via IVF. Doing so, the court said, violates the children of lesbian couples' right to care, education, and emotional continuity from both parents. Prior to the court's decision, a 2004 law prevented the non-biological mom in a same-sex couple from being registered as their child's parent. But as the judges noted in their decision, confusion over the 2004 law has led to a patchwork of interpretations across Italy, with some mayors allowing non-biological moms to be listed as parents on their children's birth certificates, while others only list the birth mothers. These divergent outcomes reflect a shifting social reality to which the legislature has yet to respond, the judges wrote, according to Reuters. In 2023, under the leadership of far-right anti-LGBTQ+ Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, the Italian Interior Ministry began cracking down on cities that allowed both members of same-sex couples to be listed as parents, as opposed to mother and father on their children's birth registrations. Thursday's ruling, which strikes down part of the 2004 law, was hailed as historic by LGBTQ plus activists. Marilena Grassadonia, an advocate with the Italian left opposition party, told Reuters that the decision restores dignity and serenity to the many rainbow families who live in our country. However, the ruling did not extend the right to IVF treatment to single women or women in same-sex relationships. Wait, what? That contradicts something. Under Italian law, only married heterosexual couples have the right to access medically assisted reproductive treatments like IVF. Okay, I see that now. The court's ruling only applies to women who seek IVF treatment abroad. While same-sex civil unions have been legal in Italy since 2016, same-sex couples do not have the right to adopt, thanks in part to opposition from the Catholic Church. Surrogacy remains illegal as well, and restrictions preventing the adoption of stepchildren by non-biological parents presents major hurdles for gay fathers seeking to adopt children conceived via surrogacy abroad. However, as Agence France Presse, or AFP, reports, a court in northern Italy also ruled Thursday in favor of a non-biological father's right to adopt his child conceived abroad via surrogacy. So men are involved too. Good. Chiara Soldatini, a lesbian mother who moved from Italy to Spain last year, celebrated the Constitutional Court's decision. I am happy no one will now be able to challenge the fact our son is our son, she told Agence France Presse. However, she noted that she would only uncork the champagne when all those families with two dads can toast with me. Now is not the time to settle, she added. Okay, so that clarifies that I was right before. It's just lesbian couples, not gay couples. So, yeah. Still, it's a step in the right direction. It's good news. We're going to go with that. All right, let's see. What do we have next? Teacher loses job after unhinged mom accuses her of grooming her child to be gay. Which anybody with half a brain knows is not a thing. Only bigots think that that is a thing. Because as I've mentioned many, many times on this channel, I grew up seeing straight couples, seeing straight people, and yet I'm still asexual. So, no, you do not groom people to be a certain sexuality. That is just, you just are who you are. You're either attracted to men, you're attracted to women, you're attracted to both, you're attracted to both plus trans, you're attracted to nobody. All of these are a thing, and none of it has anything to do with someone approaching you trying to convince you to be a certain sexuality. That is literally not how this works. The community rallied for the teacher who lost her job for not following a rule she didn't know existed. Which makes me wonder if that means that rule actually doesn't exist. Because, normally teachers would know what rules they need to follow. Anyway, an investigation by a Florida school into charges that a teacher groomed a student to transition and to be gay resulted in the school district ending her contract despite a recommendation to only reprimand her. So much bigotry in this. Again, I explained the groomed. So, not only is this student get groomed to become gay, but also to become trans? I'm really curious who this child is, because anybody who knows anything about trans and transitioning is, if you are a boy and you're attracted to another boy, you're gay. But once one of those boys transitions, well, could be bi. But once one of those boys transitions to a girl, that means that they are now straight if they are attracted to boys. So I'm really, really curious how logical this actually turns out being. AP English teacher Melissa Calhoun is the first known Florida educator to lose her job as a result of 2023 Florida Board of Education rule, stating parents must provide written permission before an educator can use any alternative to a student's legal name. Alrighty. So nicknames aren't allowed then? If I prefer to be called Sue or Susie instead of Susan, would that run afoul of the law? Because that's technically not my legal name. My legal name is Susan. The rule is part of a wave of Don't Say Gay legislation and policy enacted in Florida over the last several years. The report was made public through a Freedom of Information Act requested by the news outlet Florida Today. In March, Brevard County School Board member Matt Visser was contacted by a parent who accused faculty at Satellite High School of influencing and grooming her daughter to transition and be gay, according to the report. An investigation was launched by school officials who questioned multiple teachers and other staff. Calhoun was the only teacher who admitted to using the teen's chosen name. She had taught the student since 2022 before the rule was enacted. Calhoun immediately expressed willingness to abide by the nickname prohibition and told the student, a 17-year-old senior, dual enrolled at Eastern Florida State College, that she could no longer use it. In subsequent meetings with the lead investigator for Brevard Public Schools, Calhoun said the student did well in class and didn't suffer any behavioral issues, so she didn't have occasion to speak with the parents. She hadn't checked to see if the student had a completed parent permission form, calling it a complete oversight, according to the report. Calhoun said she wasn't using the student's chosen name with any political intent and said she was shocked when she learned she was in violation of school policy. Wait a minute. That doesn't make sense, because I thought she went back to saying she couldn't use her chosen name. So what is the problem? And of course she didn't do it with political intent. She did it because a child who thinks that she might be trans wanted to use a different name. There's no political intent there. It's just you're being human and you're showing empathy. I do not understand why people have to politicize everything. The final report recommended that Calhoun receive a letter of reprimand stating that she had violated 4 separate Florida statutes and policies. There was no recommendation that Calhoun be fired for the offense. Despite that, Superintendent Mark Randall made the decision not to renew Calhoun's contract. The district reported Calhoun's violation to the state. Okay, so technically she wasn't fired, her contract just wasn't renewed. Okay. That's entirely different. Explaining why Rendell ignored the investigator's recommendation, a district spokesman said the decision was made by Dr. Rendell based on uncertainty surrounding the state's response to the incident. We do not have any historical data to guide us on the FLDOE or Florida Department of Education response to this violation. We do not want to start the 2025-2026 school year with a teacher whose license may be revoked by the state. And actually, as much as I disagree with her being fired, that's at least reasonable. And, again, she wasn't technically fired, she just didn't have her contract renewed, which is totally different. Supporters of Calhoun have been out in force at school board meetings since she was severed in April. She showed up at a meeting herself this week and was given a standing ovation. Retired teacher Bill Perlman's testimony was typical of the outpouring of support. He told board members, "You showed no kindness, no compassion, no due process, and no recognition of the evidence that she has shared with the estimated 3,000 students in her career at BPS," he said of Calhoun. "Many of us are really disappointed in our superintendent and our board." Every public speaker at the meeting expressed support for Calhoun, save a veteran and the chair of the local Moms for Liberty chapter. Well, that makes sense. Not the veteran, the Moms for Liberty. The board took no further action on Calhoun's case. So that is the end of that article. So, after that, let's get to more good news. Governor signs bill to stop schools from outing LGBTQ plus students to their parents. Republicans are angry that the bill tramples on so-called parents' rights. It just boggles my mind how many people are screaming parents' rights when that parent is the same flavor of bigot as they are. But once we're dealing with parents' rights of parents who actually exhibit empathy and actually care about their kids and want to help them be happy, whether it be their sexuality or their gender identity, suddenly that's not parents' rights. Anyway, Washington Governor Bob Ferguson, a Democrat of course, has signed a comprehensive students' rights bill into law that protects LGBTQ plus youth, angering Republicans who feel the legislation quashes parental rights. HB 1296 bans discrimination against marginalized groups, including LGBTQ plus people, and establishes clear compliant procedures for when violations occur. It also limits parental access to children's health care and counseling information, which will protect many LGBTQ plus students from being outed to their parents without their consent. Now, I can see where people might have a problem with, parents should know what health care their child is receiving. I sympathize with those parents. However, if you are in a situation where your parent would at best disown you, at worst abuse you, and at really worst kick you the hell out, I can see why they, want to be on the DL when it comes to whatever health care or counseling they're getting. Because maybe it turns out they aren't trans. That's not going to put the genie back in the bottle of how their parents are going to potentially lose their shit. And if you, as a parent, want your kids to be open and telling you about these things, maybe don't be a bigot. Don't make them feel like they're terrible people or that there's something wrong with them for questioning this. Let them work it out. And if it turns out that they are indeed trans or gay, maybe, just maybe, still care about them, still love them. They're still your child. Just because they realize something about themselves, because that's how children grow. They keep realizing stuff about themselves that helps them navigate this insane world. The top priority for our school should be to ensure a safe learning environment where every student has the chance to thrive, Governor Ferguson said as he signed the bill. Washington voters passed a Parent Bill of Rights last year that granted parents access to their kids' medical and academic records. Opponents of the new law says it tramples on these rights. Like I said, I sympathize with those parents, and it does look like it's trampling on this law that parents should have access to their kids' medical records. So I don't know how this is being reconciled. I haven't seen the text of either law. But at the same time, if, like I said, if a child does not feel comfortable talking to you about what they're doing, whether it be working on transition or just talking it out, they also have to do what they have to do to stay safe. So, yeah, it's a tricky situation. I really don't know, like I said, if this tramples that law. So I really can't say much more. Brianne Gray, a parent in the state, spoke to Como News to express her anger over the bill's passage. The parents should have that knowledge so they can provide those resources for their children, Gray said. It should never be the government's choice, the government's decision. Nobody is saying it should be. They are saying that there are some kids who don't feel safe talking to their parents because, okay, it's great that you would provide proper resources for your children. Help them get the counseling they need or whatever health care they need. That's great. That's great that you're open-minded and that you wouldn't be hateful to your child if they turned out to be trans. However, not all parents are. So this is not saying that at no time can parents ever access their kids' medical records. If you have a good relationship with your kids, I'm sure your kids won't have a problem with that. But not all kids have a good relationship with their parents. This is why schools, teachers, school districts need to work with the parents, not against the parents. I'm not suggesting that there are not unsafe homes, that there are not situations where we certainly need to have resources available for these students. But I think it is completely absurd to think that we're going to shut parents out of our students' lives and our children's lives. Again, I'm not sure that that's what the law says. Again, if you are in a good relationship with your student, then there should be no problem. They should be able to grant you access. However, these unsafe homes, this is to prevent people in those unsafe homes. What resources do you want to give them if they have access to... If these parents have access to their medical records and find out that they're in the process of transitioning or that they're seeking counseling for transitioning, what resources do you want to give these kids to prevent them from their parents harming them? If should have access to these records. So I'm sympathetic. I really am. There's got to be some way to keep those kids safe. And again, kids can grant their parents access. If they have no problem with their parents accessing their medical records, I don't see a problem. I don't know, like I said, the text of this law, but I'm pretty sure it doesn't say that under no circumstances should a parent ever have access to these records. I'm pretty sure it's more along the lines of, yeah, kids get to choose who has access to their medical records. This bill will erode parents' trust, said State Senator Nikki Torres, a Republican, of course, before the bill passed. This bill is very disrespectful to parents and to families. This bill will erode parents' trust? It's because the kids don't trust their parents to not lose their shit that this bill was even considered. If we had parents who actually, didn't abuse or disown their children simply because they might be gay or trans, we wouldn't need to do this shit. No, this is not about eroding parents' trust. Parents already have shown that they do not trust their kids. Because if they did trust their kids, they would not lose their shit when they turn out to be trans or turn out to be gay, because they trust their kids enough to make that decision. This has nothing to do with parents trusting their kids. This is about whether kids can trust their parents. And if you are a parent who is open with your kid and your kid feels comfortable talking to you, this should not erode shit, because the kid wouldn't have a reason to hide this from their parents. Bill sponsor, State Representative Monica Gerardo Stonier, a Democrat, said that youth deserve a place where they can be seen and acknowledged in their full selves and experience a full curriculum, likely referring to the section of the text that ensures the right to material with historically and scientifically accurate information that includes the histories, contributions, and perspectives of historically marginalized and underrepresented groups. Stonier added, to be able to experience a school system without discrimination is top-notch priority for the teachers in this state. All right, so that is the end of that article. So let us move to the last article. Private sperm bank admits to giving sperm samples to FBI without donors' knowledge. I'm sorry, what? What the FBI wants with people's sperm remains a mystery. Oh, I'm sure it has something to do with targeting gay people, but I don't know. A representative for Seattle's sperm bank admitted to selling unused sperm vials to the FBI during an industry conference, purportedly for the agency to research splat patterns, multiple sources told LGBTQ Nation. Splat patterns? The sources say the admission came from the representative, who one source identified as Seattle Sperm Bank General Supervisor Angelo Allard, during an October 2022 meeting at the California Cryobank campus in Los Angeles. Allard did not reply to LGBTQ Nation's multiple requests for comment, nor did Seattle Sperm Bank CEO Frederick Andreessen, nor the bank's communication team. For decades, commercial sperm banks, on which many LGBTQ plus people rely on to build their families, have faced ardent criticism over a host of ethical issues fueled by a lack of industry regulations. Donor-conceived people, recipient parents, and donors themselves have long sounded the alarm on the industry's shady practices, from failing to enforce reasonable family limits to outright lying about donor medical histories. These activists continue to fight for legislation that would keep the banks in check. This ongoing tension is why the 2022 meeting occurred in the first place. Sources say sperm banks hosting the gathering as a sort of olive branch to the reform advocates, though some who attended felt the banks were not actually willing to listen. Reportedly in attendance were lawyers, medical experts, activists, and scholars. Although these activists have long known about the unethical practices of the industry, many were still shocked at what they heard. Anti-fertility fraud activist Eve Wiley called it a nails-on-a-chalkboard moment and said that the admission brought a collective gasp in the room. It was unlike any other procedure any of us have heard, she said. She said the comment was skated over pretty quickly and that the man next to the speaker was kind of like, dude, stop giving, the death stare. Dude, stop. Giving you, no. Oh my God, I cannot talk. Dude, stop. Giving, the death stare, essentially. A fertility expert who also was present in the room confirmed the story to LGBTQ Nation, saying they are not sure what precipitated it, but that a gentleman who was involved at a sperm bank raised his hand and basically said they sent sperm to the FBI at the request of the FBI for training purposes. On one level, it makes sense, that you need sperm to train on or to do some analysis of, they said. But I guess none of us had ever considered that law enforcement might reach a sperm bank to do this, certainly without consent from the parties themselves, who could be genetically identified and put into a database if this were done. They said the representatives seemed completely taken aback that anyone found the information troubling. They just stated it so matter-of-factly, like, yeah, this is what we do. And it was almost as if they didn't see any privacy protections that needed to be discussed, any issues with that, any hesitation about turning information over to law enforcement in that manner, even for training purposes. Another expert who attended the meeting also heard the admission. They told LGBTQ Nation in an emailed statement that they remembered the representative from Seattle Sperm Bank, telling the group that they provided the FBI with unused sperm for them to use for practice. The source, the same one who identified the speaker as a lard, said they do not remember the representative saying the sperm was sold, though. A transcript of a Zoom chat obtained by LGBTQ Nation shows that those who attended virtually discussing the admission in the chat. Folks called the revelation shocking and incredibly concerning, with some questioning if the DNA was being added to a criminal database. Given this administration, would be surprised. LGBTQ Nation reached out to the National FBI office and received the following response from Seattle Field Office Public Affairs Specialist Stephen Byrne. Our policy prohibits us, except in rare circumstances, from disclosing investigative techniques of an FBI investigation. But this isn't an investigation, it's supposed to be practice. However, I can plainly state that I did not find any information to suggest that the FBI has been purchasing sperm from a sperm bank. It's not clear, however, whether the sperm would have been sold to the local or national office. Additionally, Byrne took less than an hour to reply to our request for a statement. raising the question of how much digging he did before saying he did not find any information. Also reportedly present at the meeting were several LGBTQ plus family building organizations, though none have corroborated the FBI admission with LGBTQ Nation. Ron Poole Dayan, executive director of Men Having Babies, stated over email that he had no specific recollection of the admission being made. The representative who attended the meeting from Family Equality no longer works for the organization, and a spokesperson said no current staff members have additional information to share. Representatives from Collage, an organization for the children of LGBTQ plus people, and GLAD, an LGBTQ plus legal advocacy organization, did not respond to a request for comment. Wiley called it shocking and disheartening that no LGBTQ plus organization had come forward. Laura High, a donor-conceived person and activist who was not present at the meeting, expressed disappointment that these organizations have not taken action. Especially right now, we need to be able to rely on these organizations to keep the queer community safe, she told LGBTQ Nation over email. And the fact that they stayed silent on this incredibly clear violation of rights that clearly puts the queer community in jeopardy, especially under this regime, is terrifying. High said many people in the activist community have told her that they do not want to contribute to this story going public for fear of not being invited to future meetings or losing a seat at the table. And she wonders if perhaps that's why these organizations also have not spoken up. But why on earth would you want to be sitting at that kind of table that clearly has no problem putting the queer community or any marginalized community in utter danger, she said. The prospect of a bank selling sperm to the FBI without informed consent raises a number of ethical concerns, though the legality of it all is murky. Donor contracts from Seattle's sperm bank obtained by LGBTQ Nation state, I understand that once I agreed to participate in the donor program and have been accepted into the program, I may not impose restrictions on the manner in which my donor sperm may be used. Technically, people can buy sperm for any purpose, but sperm samples are not intended for that purpose, explained the fertility expert. They're intended for people to buy to family build. That is the assumption. I think there would be a lot of people who would object, for example, if law enforcement just started suddenly going through trash in search of hair or saliva, or discarded toothbrushes or fingernail clippings to include people in databases for training purposes. They said the lack of informed consent is one of the biggest issues. I've talked to sperm donors and they were not informed that this was going on. LGBTQ Nation independently received direct confirmation from one Seattle donor who said they were never told this was a possibility. Wiley said she is more concerned with sperm being mishandled or planted as evidence in a crime scene. Ugh, it's getting worse and worse. What if someone steals that sperm and then sells it on the black market and they plant that, she said, and is DNA being extracted and then being used in a database to catch criminals? It's hard to say what can happen. As someone who has spent her life fighting fertility fraud, Wiley has witnessed firsthand the horrific ways gametes can be mishandled. It's unbelievable, she said, adding that in the absence of laws, that legal landscape being the wild, wild west, it's really frustrating. High said trans people also have specific safety concerns, since they often preserve their sperm or eggs at these banks before starting gender-affirming care. And this is something I pointed out whenever I point out, do videos on gender-affirming care when people are whining about infertility being a side effect to things like puberty blockers. And I point out that these are eggs and sperm are at these banks. It's not like people just go ahead with the treatments and then be like, well, crap, I can't get pregnant, or I can't get someone else pregnant, as if that wasn't thought of before. We know this administration is targeting the queer community, Hayes said, especially the trans community, who actively uses the fertility industry to store their DNA before they medically transition. She said there is also particular concern for people of color. We are well aware that people of color are actively and heinously targeted by the police force, she said. Secretly handing over sperm from black donors or any donor of color does not just affect that donor, but potentially their entire family. We have a long and terrible history in this country of people of color getting set up for a crime by the police force. This industry, who's already very famous for excluding recipient parents and donors of color, is demonstrating that they are willing to put these donors at risk for severe injustice. Seattle has given the FBI the ability to have a genetic tracker. There is also the matter of the DNA of the children conceived from each donor being in the hands of government agency. One recipient parent, Ronnie Rizzori, who told LGBTQ Nation she became an activist in the space after she had reason to believe Seattle's sperm bank failed to report critical pieces of her donor's medical information, called it creepy. It just doesn't sound right. I mean, no matter how you look at it, and if you try to make sense of it, whatever the reason is, it's just not okay. Asked if the information made her feel worried about her kid, she replied, I mean, anything at this point related to donor conception makes me feel scared for my kids. So that is the end of that article, and that is my last article for today. So yeah, things are looking pretty scary. I mean, just think of who the FBI could go after. I didn't even think about planting evidence, but I did think about, okay, we have a database of people's sperm at the FBI for training. Now, it's possible that it's legit and that's all they're going to use it for, but I don't believe that. I do not believe that, especially with this particular FBI. With Kash Patel at the head, I honestly do not believe a word they say. So anyway, that is all I have for this video. And with that, I will see you guys in the next one.